Why would a 19-year-old calmly tell his parents he sees lights, then disappear forever? Brandon Swanson wasn't running, bleeding, or panicking. He was talking, walking, certain he was near town. But authorities later said something didn't add up. The phone call never ended with goodbye. It ended with silence.
He wasn't scared. Brandon sounded confident, like he knew exactly where he was.
Police would later insist this was a simple accident, a drunk walk, a tragic fall. But if that's true, why did Brandon's directions not match any road? Why did his phone keep connecting after his last words? And why did search teams focus on the wrong location for days? Before the disappearance, Brandon Swanson wasn't hiding anything. He attended a party in Lynd, Minnesota. Friends say he drank, but not unusually. Near midnight, his car slid into a ditch on a gravel road. The engine stalled. Brandon wasn't injured. He called his parents instead of police.
He wasn't drunk crazy. Brandon always called home when something went wrong.
Here's the contradiction. Police later emphasized alcohol, but friends emphasized responsibility. Brandon didn't flee. He waited. He followed instructions. He stayed on the line for over 40 minutes. If he was disoriented, why did he give landmarks? And if he was reckless, why call for help immediately? When police arrived, they searched near Lynd, the town Brandon believed he was approaching. But investigators were wrong. Brandon wasn't near Lynd at all. He was miles away near Taunton. That error mattered. Search teams scanned the wrong fields. Dogs followed wrong paths. Time slipped away unnoticed.
We trusted the assumption he was near town. That shaped every early decision.
Authorities later called it a misunderstanding. Critics called it tunnel vision. Brandon said he saw lights. Police assumed towns. They ignored the possibility of farms, highways, or distant yards. If location was uncertain, why commit early? And if the map was wrong, how many searches were wasted? At 1:54 a.m., Brandon Swanson said one word: "Oh shit." Then the line stayed open. No scream, no splash, no struggle. Just quiet static. His parents shouted his name. There was no response. Police later suggested a fall, but no sound of impact was recorded.
That word wasn't fear. It sounded like sudden surprise, then nothing.
If Brandon fell into water, why didn't the phone disconnect immediately? If he slipped, why no crash sound? And if he encountered danger, why wasn't there panic before the silence? Investigators never fully explained this moment, yet treated it as resolved. That contradiction still haunts the case. Search crews later focused on rivers and ditches. Dogs tracked Brandon's scent, then abruptly lost it. Some believe he crossed water. Others say scent breaks happen during human encounters. Police dismissed foul play early, but no body surfaced. No clothing, no phone. Nothing confirmed the accident
Once
theory.
police said accident, alternative possibilities stopped being seriously pursued.
Here's what critics argue was ignored. Nearby homes, outbuildings, and traffic routes weren't fully canvassed early. Media repeated the drunk accident narrative. That framing mattered. Witnesses come forward when stories feel open, not closed. Once the public believed it was solved, questions quietly stopped being asked. Search teams found no consistent footprints despite ideal conditions. Wet soil should have preserved tracks. Investigators later said terrain made tracking hard, yet photos show clear patterns near the ditch. Why did only tire marks survive? Some experts believe a vehicle may have approached after the call, unrecorded, unnoticed, unexplained.
You can't just lose all prints in wet soil. Something interrupted that path?
If Brandon wandered aimlessly, prints would scatter or fade naturally. But their absence entirely suggests interference or relocation. Law enforcement never confirmed searching private lands bordering the road that night. Did someone pick him up? Or was that possibility too inconvenient to consider once accident became the official label? Cell tower pings placed Brandon's phone far from search zones. The signal stayed active until noon the next day. Officials minimize this, calling it technical error. But analysts disagree. The phone's endurance implied protection inside a vehicle, building, or high ground, none consistent with a water accident theory. If the call ended near water, why did the phone continue transmitting hours later? No battery would last that long submerged. Some believe someone turned it off manually. Others think the phone was moved. Either way, the timeline contradicts both geography and police certainty about the river. Brandon's parents questioned every step. They asked why police delayed searches until morning. Officers cited policy. Adults have the right to disappear. But those hours were crucial. By dawn, rain had erased evidence. The Swansons felt dismissed, treated like overreacting parents instead of witnesses to an active disappearance.
They said he was an adult, but adults don't vanish mid-call without trace.
The emotional divide became structural. Investigators framed the case as a recovery mission. The family insisted it was still rescue. That subtle language shift changed resources, urgency, and morale. To the Swansons, it felt like officials were protecting their process, not their son's chances of survival. Local news labeled the event a tragic accident. National outlets echoed it. Few mentioned contradictions in coordinates or phone data. Journalists quoted police but rarely family. Each article closed the story instead of opening it. The disappearance became background noise until online forums revived it years later.
The timeline only breaks when you accept their version. It fits when you question it.
Digital sleuths uncovered early misquotes and overlooked details. They mapped Brandon's route with accuracy unseen in official files. Yet when these findings surfaced, officials dismissed them as speculation. Why the resistance? Because public doubt exposes institutional error, and admitting mistakes means re-examining years of flawed procedure. 15 years later, fragments of evidence remain sealed. Items recovered near Taunton were logged, not analyzed publicly. The official record stops short of closure. No foul play, no recovery, no certainty. Yet families nearby report hearing cries that night, never followed up, never cross-checked with Brandon's timeline. Each unanswered clue invites one question. If Brandon's fate was obvious, why withhold basic files? Transparency could end speculation, yet secrecy keeps it alive. Perhaps the truth threatens reputations more than it solves mysteries. Until that silence breaks, Brandon's voice, cut mid-sentence, remains the loudest thing in this story. Authorities eventually settled on the Yellow Medicine River. They suggested Brandon slipped, fell, and drowned, yet search divers found nothing. Currents were weak, water levels were low, no remains surfaced downstream. If the river took him, why did it return nothing? No clothing, no phone, no trace after repeated searches.
Rivers don't erase people completely, they leave something behind, always.
Critics argue the river theory solved a problem for investigators, not the case itself. Water explains disappearance without suspects or follow-ups. But it clashes with phone data, scent loss patterns, and sound evidence. The theory closed doors prematurely. Once accepted publicly, alternative explanations quietly became inconvenient distractions. Some investigators privately considered another possibility: human contact. Brandon walked near farms and isolated roads. A passing driver, a property owner, an accidental confrontation. Yet no nearby residents were formally re-interviewed years later. If someone encountered Brandon, that window closed quickly and permanently without public acknowledgement. Supporters of this theory point to the abrupt scent stop and missing footprints. Dogs don't lie. They lose trails when paths change unnaturally. Still, police insist no evidence supports foul play, but absence of evidence isn't proof, especially when potential witnesses were never exhaustively pursued. Pathologists, telecom experts, and search specialists disagree sharply on Brandon's fate. Some say accidental death fits probabilities. Others say the data contradicts it entirely. No unified conclusion exists. Yet the official stance never changed. When experts don't agree, investigations usually reopen. Here, disagreement was quietly absorbed and ignored.
Once you plot the data honestly, the official version collapses on itself.
This stalemate fuels lasting debate. Independent analysts publish maps disproving early assumptions. Police dismiss them as amateurs, but accuracy doesn't require authority, only evidence. The case remains frozen between expertise and ego. And when institutions refuse correction, uncertainty hardens into silence instead of truth. Despite no resolution, the case was never labeled cold officially. That status avoids reopening procedures while signaling completion. Critics call it bureaucratic limbo. It protects agencies from scrutiny but denies families answers. Brandon Swanson exists in paperwork as missing, yet treated operationally as resolved without proof. This contradiction keeps the mystery alive. If solved, show evidence. If unsolved, investigate. Instead, the case rests uncomfortably between. That gray zone fuels podcasts, documentaries, and renewed attention. The longer it lingers, the clearer one thing becomes. certainty was declared long before it was earned. Brandon Swanson vanished mid-conversation, mid-step, mid-life. Not one theory explains every contradiction. The phone, the silence, the location error, the missing evidence. Each answer creates a new problem, and every year without resolution transforms the case from tragedy into something more unsettling. An institutional failure frozen in
That
time.
moment never ended for us. It's still happening every day.
If Brandon's disappearance was simple, it would not resist explanation this long. If it was complex, why stop asking questions? The truth may not be dramatic, but it demands honesty. Until investigators confront their earliest assumptions, one final question refuses to disappear. What happened after, oh shit? Years later, new tips emerged. Truck drivers reported seeing a young man walking near Highway 68 that night. Police logged the calls but never publicly followed up. If true, these sightings would shift the timeline entirely, placing Brandon on pavement, not fields. Why weren't these witnesses re-interviewed later, when memories were still recoverable and verifiable?
I saw him walking steady, not stumbling, near the highway just before dawn that night.
Authorities argued the tips were too vague. Critics counter that vagueness demands verification, not dismissal. Eyewitness accounts fade, but patterns persist. Ignoring them protected the existing theory from disruption. If Brandon reached the highway, everything after the phone call must be reconsidered, including who else was out there watching, passing, or stopping that night nearby. Several psychologists studied Brandon's behavior during the call. They note clear speech, logical navigation, and no panic. This contradicts extreme intoxication. Police leaned on alcohol to explain confusion, yet never released toxicology proof. If impairment was central, why is the evidence missing from official records entirely, even in summary form today for public review purposes?
His speech patterns show orientation and planning, inconsistent with severe intoxication assumptions made publicly early.
Alcohol became a narrative shortcut. It shifted blame away from procedural errors toward personal choice. That framing reduced urgency and softened scrutiny, but when experts challenge that assumption, officials rarely respond. Instead, they repeat it until repetition sounds like fact, leaving contradictions unaddressed, uninvestigated, and structurally protected from outside challenge or correction by design alone. Multiple law enforcement agencies handled parts of the case. Records show inconsistent communication between county, state, and search teams. Each assumed the other verified key details. No single authority owned the mistakes. When responsibility fractures, accountability evaporates, leaving families navigating a maze without answers or ownership for critical early decisions that shaped everything afterward permanently.
Too many agencies touched it, so no one owned the early mistakes or corrected them.
Internal reviews acknowledged missteps without assigning fault. That language matters. It signals closure without learning. Families seek truth. Institutions seek stability. When those goals conflict, cases stall. Brandon's disappearance exposes how systems prioritize reputation over revision, even when revision could change outcomes or restore public trust lost long ago through silence, delay, and procedural avoidance. Online communities continue to reanalyze the case. They overlay maps, rebuild timelines, and compare similar disappearances. Their work keeps pressure alive. Authorities call it noise, but collective scrutiny has solved cases before. Why dismiss help that costs nothing, unless the answers threaten settled conclusions already publicly defended for years by officials, agencies, spokespeople, and departments? Public memory keeps Brandon present. Each retelling exposes new angles and old avoidances. The case endures because it resists simplification. Tragedies fade when explained. This one lingers because explanations collapse under scrutiny, leaving the core question untouched. What truly interrupted Brandon's walk after that final word? No answer has survived time, pressure, evidence, review, challenge. After 17 years, Brandon Swanson remains missing. No charges, no recovery, no resolution. Officials stand by probability. His family stands by the call. Probability cannot explain silence, errors, or withheld records. Until evidence replaces assumption, the case remains unfinished, uneasy, and unsettled for everyone who listens to that final moment again and again, still waiting. If this was only an accident, why does it demand so much defense? Why do questions trigger resistance? The case forces one final reckoning. Are we seeking truth or protecting conclusions? Until that's answered, Brandon's disappearance remains open, not because it's unsolvable, but because someone stopped solving it long before the evidence was finished speaking.